Hey guys, welcome to today's episode, and we are so excited. We have Stephen Hussey with us, and today we are talking all things about weight loss, circadian rhythm, your hormones, and what actually causes your heart issues. So, Stephen actually had a heart attack at the age of 34, and so he's been on a road to figure out what caused it, how to prevent it, and we are talking all things health. So, Stephen, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So let's first start with your story because that is very young. My dad actually had a heart attack, I think at age 54. And he actually passed away at 58. So that's pretty young. So talk about your story and how you had heart disease at the age of 34 and had a heart attack.
Well, that was just the thing, is that I had no heart disease, but I had a heart attack. So it was very instantaneous when things happened because 6 months prior to my heart attack, I had a CAC score done, which is a measurement of how much calcified plaque there are in the arteries of your heart. And it was zero, which is the perfect score. So there was no calcified plaque. And further, whenever I was having the heart attack and they did the heart cath to place the stent and bust open the clot, they found no atherosclerosis anywhere in my arteries. They just found a clot that formed. So it's a spontaneous clot. And so, backing up, my history is I've been type 1 diabetic since I was 9 years old, which heavily predisposed me to heart disease. Even though I had held that off, there was no atherosclerotic plaque in my arteries. Um, but I'd always been very health conscious. I'd always kind of eaten a good diet and exercise and just been a health conscious person as far as my understanding of what health conscious meant. But then, I went through a period of stress, a very stressful time of my life. Before then, like COVID was happening and I was having some relationship issues. And then I got some very stressful news about a family member about a day and a half before my heart attack. And it was the inability of me or anybody in my family to do anything for that person and help them. We were just kind of sitting there waiting, hoping it was going to be okay. And so in that state, I unwisely woke up on that Tuesday morning and tried to do the same kind of intense workout that I usually do. And in that state, it caused enough inflammation and turbulence in the arteries of those arteries in my heart, which are the arteries under the most pressure of any arteries in the body, which is why they more commonly have these issues. And it triggered a spontaneous clot to form, and that blocked my left anterior descending artery and prevented blood flow, and I was having a heart attack. But the thing is that I was laying there in the hospital afterwards and asking the doctors, why do you think this happened? And I'd done a lot of research on heart disease prior to this because I was interested in it. As a type 1 diabetic, I was predisposed. And I asked them, they said, oh, we have cholesterol. It's cholesterol. Cholesterol causes heart disease. Cholesterol causes heart attacks. And at this point in time, we have a multitude of, scientific research that shows that that is not the case, that it is not the driver of atherosclerosis or heart attacks. Matter of fact, there's research that shows the contrary, that the higher your cholesterol is, the less rates of heart disease and heart attacks that people have, associational studies anyways. And so that begs the question of why do we get heart disease, right? Why does this happen? Why do we get heart attacks? And this is the quest that I was on because this is very personal to me now. I do not want that to happen again, obviously. I was very fortunate to have survived. But the answer, from what I found in literature, is that it's about clotting. It's about spontaneous clotting. It can be chronically low-grade clotting that kind of accumulates on the lining of blood vessels, or it can be large enough that it can block a whole vessel instantaneously, like in my case. And there's lots of evidence that show that atherosclerosis is made up of clotting tissue. There's very little, if any, cholesterol present. And everything that the body does to deposit clotting tissue on an artery is in response to injury to the artery. And so we have to ask ourselves what injures the artery. And there's many things that can do that. It could be high amounts of stress. It could be toxin exposure. It could be a processed food diet creating insulin resistance or leptin resistance, basically leading us toward type 2 diabetes. It could be a lack of infrared light, which is naturally comes from the sun. All these different things leave our arteries vulnerable to inflammation and damage. And when that happens and the body can't repair it because it's either overwhelmed or the mechanisms of repair are interfered with, then it has to do something to stop that artery from being damaged and rupturing, because bleeding arteries in the body are much worse. So what it does is it deposits clotting tissue, which is the same thing that would happen if I cut my skin and a scab forms to stop the bleeding. It's a clotting tissue that forms, and that's what atherosclerosis is. And that can build up slowly over time if it's this low-grade inflammation, or if we get ourselves into situations where there's high amounts of acute inflammation, we can get acute clotting that can form. And that's mainly what drives heart attacks. I mean, that's kind of the very abridged version of everything that I found. That's the driver of the heart attacks and heart disease, like atherosclerosis.
Yes, so I know that you work as a doctor in the chiropractic realm, and but you also are really passionate about just coaching people back to health. And I know that you kind of teach people about the power of food, lifestyle change, and just different environment changes to kind of modify your health. So I want you to talk a little bit about some things you've implemented, since this, like you've said, hey, I'm now doing A, B, C, and D. And here's some of the things that are super important that I coach other people to make as daily rituals.
Yeah. Um, I'd say the two most important things that I've done since this happened, which the story of my healing is even more incredible than the fact that it happened in the first place, because the way that I healed was just unheard of to doctors. But the things that I've implemented since, and the two main things are I increased my infrared light exposure in many different ways, which we'll talk about, and I set my circadian rhythm because my diet has stayed the same. It's a very whole foods diet. It's lower carbohydrate, which means that I do make some ketones. I'm not in full ketosis, I'd say, but I do eat a more lower carb diet, and that has stayed the same. My exercise has stayed the same, and my toxin exposure has stayed the same. I mean, I've always tried to limit toxin exposure and that kind of stuff. So what changed for me was infrared light exposure and setting my circadian rhythm. So what does that mean? Well, humans, for most of the time, humans have been on Earth, have been outside under sunlight, which is about 40 to 50% infrared light at all times when the sun is up. So infrared light is a huge stimulus to our bodies that provides us with a lot of energy. And there's studies that show that the lack of sunlight exposure we're getting from living indoors and under artificial lighting is incredibly detrimental to our health. And the mechanisms behind that involve like structured water formation and infrared light being what, structures the water in our bodies. And so that's one of the biggest issues. And it tracks exactly with when we started to see our epidemic of chronic disease, which, in the early 1900s, especially heart disease, it was almost unheard of, especially heart attacks and coronary heart disease. And so in the right 1940s, 50s, heart disease started to rise, and that correlates exactly with when we had fluorescent lighting invented, and we started moving more indoors under these bright lights. And then LED bulbs were invented in the 70s. And then, so heart disease, that's when heart disease started to rise right there. And it's not the only thing that contributed, but it's definitely a contributor, this lack of infrared light exposure. We've also been told the sun is bad for us, that it causes skin cancer, which is completely untrue according to the literature. And so if that tracks exactly with when our chronic disease epidemic has happened. And so that increasing my infrared light exposure, which I did through getting sunlight as often as I could, being smart about not burning because that's just uncomfortable. And I also got an infrared sauna, which I used 4 to 6 times a week for about 20 minutes each time. And I have like a red and infrared light panel that I sit in front of, especially on days where it's harder to get sun, or if I didn't get any that day because I wasn't able to get outside or it was raining or something like that. And that's how I kind of boost my infrared light exposure. And then the second thing that I did, which I think was super important because of it's the signal that tells your body to heal, and that is setting your circadian rhythm. So what that means is setting your body to the day-night cycle of the sun, like giving your body very clear signals of when it's daylight and when it's nighttime. And so that also has to do with artificial light. So when we have artificial light on after sunset, that blue light from the artificial light tells your body that it's daytime. And your body is trying to tick on this 24-hour clock. Every cell in the body is trying to do that. And that's based on the 24-hour day. But the light, if the blue light is on after sunset, it tells your body that it's daytime and your body thinks that it's noon. when that happens. And so then things don't happen like they're supposed to. Your body doesn't get the right signals of what to do and when to do it. And every single one of your hormones is triggered by the light cycle, the day cycle of the sun. So basically, when the sun rises, cortisol is supposed to spike. When blue light or when light hits the eye, it tells the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain to communicate with the hypothalamus and the pituitary and the pineal gland, which are basically the controllers of all our hormones, to do what they're supposed to do. And then blue light goes, it's the highest at midday, which is not always noon. It's when blue light is highest, and then it starts to wane throughout the rest of the day. And then when sun sets, we're supposed to get a signal of darkness. And when the darkness signal happens, our body starts making melatonin. However, if we have artificial light on, we don't make melatonin. That gets shut down, or we don't make the extra melatonin we need to tell your body to go to sleep and to have deep restorative cleansing and healing sleep, which is supposed to happen every single night. And so if you're not blocking blue light after sunset by using low lighting or blue blocking glasses or things like that, these artificial lights, then it's like you never took the trash out in your house. Eventually, it becomes unlivable because it's so dirty. It's like you never cleaned your house, right? That's supposed to happen every single night, and that process is being shut down by artificial blue light after sunset. And so those are the main two things I did. I set my circadian rhythm, which allowed things to heal. And there's plenty of evidence in the literature that shows that if we have enough melatonin and if we have deep restorative sleep, that the lining of our arteries heals. There's evidence that shows that if we set our body to the day-night cycle of the sun, then we get our leptin signaling. Well, leptin is a hormone that signals for fat storage or fat expenditure. That leptin signaling becomes optimized, and we lose weight. So just as much as food is driving, obesity or weight loss resistance and things like that, leptin resistance driven by disrupted circadian rhythm is a huge driver. And it's just in the literature everywhere. You just type disrupted circadian rhythm and weight loss or obesity, or no matter what it is, metabolic syndrome, whatever it is, like there's plenty of literature on it. So this is just as much a driver of that as anything else. And those are the two main things I did. And for me personally, my heart completely healed, despite not taking or only taking one of the medications they recommended, which is a blood thinner, because there was a stent in my heart. So I took that for 6 months. But I didn't take the other 4 medications they told me I'd be on the rest of my life. Because I just don't think and I'm not giving medical advice to anybody. That's just what I chose to do personally. I don't think that that's the path to health and healing. I did these other things and my heart completely recovered. And I also reversed atherosclerosis in my leg doing that. But because of the intervention they did to place the stent, which I'm grateful for, I developed atherosclerosis in my leg because of where they had to go in to place the stent. And I completely reversed that with infrared light, grounding, and sunlight. Which the vascular surgeons were just kind of blown away. They said we can't say that it's better because we don't see these things get better. But it completely reversed. So that's kind of my story. That's kind of what I did.
I don't know about you guys, but I am stressed. And if you're feeling overwhelmed this holiday season, then I get it. With all the family get togethers, it is just a relentless source of stress. But anyway, there is something that I've got called Stress Guardian, and it's actually made by Bioptimizers, the people who make the magnesium breakthrough, which I love, love, love. But anyway, they are literally made this new product. It has 14 adaptogenic herbs and it just regulates your stress. I just actually took some right this second and it's awesome. If you go to stressguardian.com/wasteaway and put in waste away for 10% off your first order, it's stressguardian.com/wasteaway. Go there now.
So I just recently moved to Florida and we moved like 3 minutes away from Siesta Key Beach. And so every day me and my husband have been going walking on the beach, getting grounding on the beach. And also I'm getting way more sun than I ever have gotten before. So the sun here is it feels like it's like twice as hot.
Mhm.
And we're just obviously getting more sun because we're closer to the beach. I used to live in Virginia Beach, so I was right by the beach too. But because it's warmer here, we just are grounding more and going on the beach more. And so I want you to talk, and I feel like my health has really gotten so much better since we've moved here. And I feel like, a lot of people say, when I moved to Florida, my health has gotten a lot better. But I want you to kind of talk a little bit about, the sun has ultraviolet, UV light, and infrared light. And they're both types of electromagnetic radiation. And, it differs in wavelength and energy. But talk about if you're outside, right, and you're getting sunlight and you're getting a certain amount of sun, how much sun do you recommend? And then do you still need to do the red light therapy, and talk about what the benefits of doing that as well are?
Yeah. Well, if you're getting plenty of sunlight, then no, I don't think you necessarily need all the infrared therapies. But if you're not, or you want to boost your infrared because you have a specific thing you're trying to get over, like for me, I was trying to, heal my heart and things like that. Then yeah, you could definitely use that. Or especially in winter and colder places, it's easier to boost your infrared exposure if you have those therapies, the infrared sauna or the red light panels or things like that. But if you're getting natural sunlight, that is always best because that's the way that light is supposed to come. That's the way that humans have known it for, however long you believe humans have been here, until about, 80 years ago, 90 years ago. We started getting different forms of light because even incandescent bulbs, which were invented in late 1800s, those are very high in red and infrared and very low in blue. And so they didn't disrupt our circadian rhythm too much. And fire was the same way, very high in red and infrared, very low in blue. But then we had fluorescents and LEDs. That was the problem. So if you're getting a lot of sunlight, then that's fine. Now, people may be thinking, well, sunlight causes skin cancer, right? And I want to put that to bed because there's really no evidence that it does. There are studies that show that excessive UV light exposure, UVB light exposure, can cause the changes in the skin that lead to skin cancer. But those studies are done with only UVB light exposure, like a lamp that only does UVB, which would never happen in natural sunlight. It's always balanced by all the colors and wavelengths of the sun. So, we have UV through infrared and all the colors in between. And so it's always supposed to be balanced like that. And the reason that red and infrared light therapies are beneficial is because we're so deficient in them. But I think that overuse of just red and infrared would eventually have a tipping point where it would become harmful. So we use them, sparingly. We boost our infrared with them, but we don't overuse them. But the sunlight is always going to be best. And so if we look at the studies with melanoma and sunlight, they basically showed that there's studies that show that worldwide, the people who got more UVB light exposure from sunlight had less melanoma. And there's studies that show that people with melanoma, the more UVB light they got from sunlight, the less likely they were to die from melanoma. There's also studies that show that artificial blue light can induce these changes in the skin cells of humans that lead to skin cancer. And they've actually been able to induce skin cancer with blue light exposure, artificial blue light exposure in mice. And then further, there's studies that show that, the imbalance of too much UVA light without vitamin D, which is created by UVB exposure. So high UVA, low vitamin D creates the changes in skin that cause skin cancer. And that's what modern windows create. Modern windows filter out the UVB and they let in UVA. And so we're all sitting behind these modern windows, and that's what's creating that. So like my window is open right now, and it's open as often as I can have it because I want the natural light coming in. I never have the artificial lights on in my house. And after dark, I use incandescent bulbs and blue blocking glasses. So that's an incredibly important part of our health because light is what gives our bodies instructions. It's information, which you mentioned that all this light is on the electromagnetic spectrum of energy. And so other things on the electromagnetic spectrum are things like wireless signals and radio waves and things like that. They're just outside the natural frequencies of the sun. And so are the natural wavelengths and frequencies of the sun, which means that we know that light carries information because I can pick up my cell phone and call you right now wirelessly, sending information over that wireless signal. And so light from the sun is also information. So we have to make sure that the information we're getting is the correct information. So that comes from the sun, and that's what tells our body, the time of day and all that stuff. So those are Like sunlight is super important. It's providing all the energy for all life on Earth. And if we disconnect ourselves from it, then our health will suffer because of it.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. So let's talk about as far as when you had said that, like with the canned light and when you're inside the house and the fluorescent light. So when you are at home, what kind, like, is there a specific bulb, like, in your inside, like if you have canned lighting, is there a specific light bulb that you're using? Because obviously you have to have some lights on in the house, right? So what is the best? And is there a setting on it? It's funny because we have can lighting in our house, and the bulbs that we have, it actually has like 5 different settings on it. So when you actually put it in, it has like um
Hmm.
5 different settings inside the light bulb. So talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah. And this is tough too, because like honestly, after sunset, it's supposed to be dark. And the only kind of light we would get would be fire, which is kind of a dull light. It's still a light though. And incandescent bulbs kind of mimic fire as far as what colors they emit. It's much more red and infrared, which is infrared is heat, which is why those bulbs get hot, you know. But as far as like daytime indoor lighting, the artificial blue, that's or the artificial lights that are very high in blue light, I should say, the LED bulbs, and the fluorescents are very high in green light, which are kind of a weird thing. But those can be like, especially the LEDs high in blue, those can be damaging to the photoreceptors in our eyes and our skin, regardless of like circadian rhythm signaling. They can just be harmful in and of themselves. So more, I guess, appropriate lighting. They do make bulbs. You have to probably have to order them. You're not going to find them at Lowe's. Bulbs that emit full spectrum. So it's not high in blue. There's going to be a full spectrum light that's emitted from them. So you can find those at different companies online. You could use incandescent bulbs, which are not going to be as bright as the ones that we're used to, those really bright LED bulbs. But incandescents are going to be higher in red and infrared. But honestly, like I just keep my curtains open and I let natural light come in during the day. And that's just what I use. I don't ever turn the overhead lights on. I mean, there's still LED bulbs in them, but I never turn them on. And then I have lamps throughout the house that I use that have incandescent bulbs for after sunset. So that's kind of how I do things now. Like I said, if people do want to have those lights, you can have those full spectrum light bulbs you can get from different companies, but that's still blue light. So after sunset, you still want to block that. You still want to keep low lighting, and you want to use blue blocking glasses, like a quality pair, not just any knockoff brand, that will help your body regulate when it is nighttime. Keep the screen time down, even turn the blue light on the screens down. There's many devices that can help you do that, or many programs you can have on your computer and stuff to help you do that. All that stuff is very important, but our lighting environment is really, really critical to, for your body getting the right signals to express health.
Guys, I just want to interrupt for just a second, and I want you to hear Paul Saladino talk about why liver is so important. And if you don't like liver, we have another option for you.
Your ancestors were eating liver. And the reason that this sort of wisdom has been passed down is because liver is very nutritious. It's basically nature's multivitamin. If you look at the nutrients in meat, they're great. You've got zinc, you got B6, you got B12, you got some K2. But if you look at liver, it really complements what's in muscle meat. And there are many unique nutrients found in organs, specifically liver as a powerhouse of these, that are difficult to obtain outside of liver. Like meat and organs are like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. They're supposed to be eaten together. The easiest way to eat liver is just to do it raw. If you don't want to eat liver raw, you can cook it. But the reason that I like to do it raw is because there are unique nutrients in liver that are probably somewhat degraded when you cook the liver.
This really is like the most nutrient rich supplements that you can find. And they are amazing. I have tried them. I absolutely love them. So just go to heartandsoil.co, use the coupon code and save you some money there.
Got it. Well, this has been awesome. And go ahead and close us with kind of your last tips, that we haven't talked about, that if someone wants to take their health to another level, give us kind of 3 last closing tips that you'd say, implement these and your health will kind of be improved.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and these days it gets really confusing. There's so much information out there. There's so many like people telling you to do this or that. And ultimately, like people just kind of simplify it or to simplify it. It's just like, when we started removing ourselves from our natural environment, which is nature, which is being outside, when we started doing that, we started to see chronic disease because all your body is it's trying to get signals from its environment. And it picks up those signals and it responds accordingly. So we have to give it the right signals. And it turns out when you look into it, you see all the research, the right signals are what nature provides us. And so when you think about doing a health behavior, think about, is this getting me closer to or back closer to, the context of living in nature within the confines of my modern day life, right? Because obviously we can't just all go live in the woods these days. And so like the three things I would say that are probably the most important things are one, eat a whole foods. I would say more animal-based diet. I think that is the best food for humans. That's what humans have been eating for a long time. And I would say especially only whole food carbohydrates. So just clean up the diet. As long as it's mostly whole foods, you're doing pretty good. I would say get as much sunlight as you can and be safe about it. Don't burn. And then I would say set your circadian rhythm, which are things we've talked about. Those are probably the three most important things that anybody could do for their health. Like if anybody comes to me as a from my health consulting, those are the three things that we start with first. Let's do these first. And then if you still have symptoms after you regulate those things, then we can investigate further. But usually that stuff right there will get rid of a ton of ailments and issues that people are having.
With the blue blocking glasses, what are your favorite and when do you start working or start wearing them?
As soon as the sun sets, you got to block blue light. So my favorite brand, and there's lots of good brands, but my favorite brand is Filter Optics, optics with an X at the end. And people can use the discount code Dr. Hussey for I think it's 20% off, maybe 15. But there's also other good ones like Bon Charge and Viva Rays, and there's lots of good companies out there. So you can kind of look at those three companies and see which frames you like best and everything. But they're all good. They're all blocking all the blue. So those are important. And then yeah, as soon
So
as the sun sets,
do you not watch TV at night at all? Or do you
I
watch it with the glasses?
I don't watch TV at night. Occasionally, I might be watching some sporting event. But if you are, it's critically important that you're wearing the glasses. I mean, your skin will pick up on the blue light too. So try and turn the brightness down on your screen as much as you can. There's even like things you can buy to put. I mean, lots of TVs these days, you can turn down the blue light on them. Some of them you can't though. But there's also things you can buy that go over the TV screen and block like 90% of the blue light and things like that. And it's all going to change the color and the image of the TV. But when we're talking about health, that's just a sacrifice you got to make because it's one of the most critically important things for it.
I like it. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Yeah, my website is resourceyourhealth.com. People can reach out to me there, see my recommended products, and my health consulting is on there. I also have 3 books, which are available on Amazon. They're called The Health Evolution, Understanding the Heart, and my latest one, Pain Sense. And then I'm on social media on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter or X, and just Dr. Stephen Hussey, Dr. Stephen Hussey.
I love it. Well, you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.